We're here at the NJCAA webinar series with the Army National Guard. That's right, the Army National Guard webinar series, NJCAA. It is April 14th, and we are a quarter way through the year, and we've had a ton of fun so far. We've already had 2 webinars this year with some really amazing guests and some fun opportunities out there to learn. But tonight, no matter where you are, what time zone you are, we're going to have some fun tonight learning from some amazing people about legacy. And it's really important that you kind of listen in, because when it comes to legacy, we're it's important for us to leave it, right? So we're going to learn from some experts tonight. We're going to learn about all the opportunities there are in college esports, as well as what you can do if you're in the college space, or if you're trying to get recruited, or you're recruiting. Whatever it may be, these webinars are here for you. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our amazing guests. We have Billy Howard, Jackson Lewis, Height, Height. And of course, we have our amazing Sergeant Flores. How are you guys today?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Awesome. Well, glad we got us all on the screen here. I can see you guys. It looks amazing. Looks nice and clean. Oh, you've got the cool triangle pyramid computer again, don't you?
Yes. If you want to spend $300 on a case, this is one way to do it. Probably not the best thing to do, but it is what it is.
But where's your other place that has like a black backdrop? Where's that?
That's in the office. So I'm actually doing this from home. We have some pretty cool gear in the office. However, home is home. Just a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And you're in Texas? Right?
I'm actually currently still in Kentucky, originally from Texas.
But you've been on the road a lot in hotels lately.
Yes.
Were you like salt? Yeah, you were like doing something that you couldn't tell me, otherwise you have to kill me. I thought that's what it was, right?
Not exactly. I was in DC doing some briefs. Then right after that, I went to the Winter Majors for RLCS. Fun time with a bunch of buddies in LA. Then I went to Philly, back to Kentucky, back to Philly, and then I'll be in LA again next month, doing some stuff with IGN G4. So it should be cool.
So I'm over in Kansas, you're in Kentucky, and then we have 2 Missouri fellas down here, Jackson and Billy. Jackson, how are you first? Yeah. What do you got there? What's on your shelves there? Is that like collectibles behind you? Amiibo. Okay. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to say I do and sound really cool. I don't know what that is. Would you mind elaborating what an Amiibo collection is? Gotcha. Okay. So in 40 years, you'll have those in a nice pristine case and be able to pay for your kids' college. It sounds like. Awesome. So great. And what part of Missouri are you in right now? Okay. Yeah. Right. So just north of you, here in Kansas City on the Missouri side, Billy Howard. It looks like you're in office and it's loud there at Generation Esports. How's everything going there?
It is going well. Right in the heat of getting ready for playoffs for all of our leagues. So yeah, absolutely, it's a good time to be alive.
And you're talking about mainly the NJCAA. You're helping operate. You guys operate that league. Is that correct?
Oh yes. We have. We actually just finished up our Rainbow Six playoffs, but we have our 11 other titles that are going to be going into playoffs here. I'll be running all the seedings for that on Saturday. So just a lot of prep, making sure all of our loose ends are tied up before we get into the playoffs.
Nice. Now I did hear from Blind College, BLINN. Say that right?
Blind. Yeah.
They won Overwatch already? In NJCAA?
No, not yet. No, I have not seen the playoffs, so I'd be very impressed how they won when I haven't put the brackets together yet.
Maybe I hear that they're pretty good in that and also undefeated in Valorant. So is that right, Matt? Matt's telling us in the chat. I don't know if they're pretty good. The guy was reaching out to me today. He's like, "Yeah, well, we're pretty good to go for the championship in Atlanta. I'm sorry, the CECC. They got invited to. So, well, there's some good teams. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
And Billy, let's start with you, and we'll work our way back around. Tell me a few places where you've coached and where you coach now as well.
Yeah, so I got my start at the University of Northern Iowa back in 2014. Back in the days when before C-Law existed, it was called Ivy Law. That was kind of my first stint into it. Did 3 years there. Went to University of North Georgia. Did a season there. Won the Peach Belt Conference Championship in 2017, 2018, and then went to Arizona State. Did a season there, and then went to Hawkeye Community College. That's how I was introduced to the NJCAA, and did 2.5 seasons with them, and now working with Generation Esports. I'm also coaching part-time for Missouri Western State. Coaching bug just couldn't let go, so I'm coaching their League of Legends team in the ACAC.
That's awesome. The forever coach. And Jackson, I think we're checking on your mute in there, but I'll recap if we'll try it one more time to see if they can hear you. But I know you're down in Neosho, Missouri, and you're coaching there. We'll go ahead and ask you a question. So, how is it down there? Where else have you coached before, or have you anywhere else?
No, so Crowder College, it's my number one. So I'm in the middle of
Nice.
my third year there now.
Okay, nice. And are you guys? Would you consider? I know this is going to make Billy skin crawl. Are you considered a varsity club? If I say varsity.
Yes. So the way that Crowder's decided to structure their athletics is we're just considered we were their fifth. Now we are one of 7 or 8 athletic programs alongside the rest of sports. So we fall under the same athletics director and
Mm-hmm.
are structured very similar to those programs.
Nice. And that's supported through your athletic department.
Yes, it all
Mm-hmm.
runs through the same
Mm-hmm.
place, which has been
Great.
so far so good. We'll see if we can keep it rolling.
Okay, that's awesome. Great. Well, we're gonna dive more into everything esports and college esports. Sergeant Flores, I'd love to hear kind of your take on what the Army National Guard thinks about leaving a legacy. If we want to jump into leaving a legacy for your career, leaving a legacy for your family. I think probably, obviously, we're focused a little bit on esports, but how, when you work with
Mhm.
your teams, is leaving a legacy important in what you do?
So, in the Army National Guard, it's kind of ingrained into our very existence, if you will. I mean, we started, December 13th, 1636, if I remember correctly. So, a couple centuries. We've been doing it for quite some time. So, one of the bigger things that we always embody is kind of teaching the teacher and then so on to our future generations. So, what my sergeant has taught me, I now teach to my citizen soldiers, and it's been really good. I mean, you have literally centuries of experience kind of being taught down from the bottom down, and it's been really great. Now, in particular to esports, everything
Mm-hmm.
we've been doing, it's similar to a lot of high school and collegiate programs that are starting or paving the way, and it's a lot of hard work. It really is. However, we're always setting that path for our future generations to have a better experience than we've had. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something really big with us as far as in regards to esports. For me, I think of, hey, whenever a new guardsman joins, he's going to have this community where, he or she is able to play with, influencers or just, play online with fellow guardsmen from different states. And it's a wonderful experience because at the end of the day, whenever I joined the Army National Guard, I didn't know there was a bunch of gamers like me. And then all of a sudden, our esports program started, and I've made some lifelong friends, and we play on Discord all the time. We've met actually in person, which has been a super cool experience.
Mm-hmm.
Met up at LAN. So for all those out there that have not been to a LAN, go. Regardless of the game title, just go and have a good time. It's you find your people, people like
Yeah.
us, right? A
Right.
bunch of gamers essentially. So it's been a lot of fun, and with legacy too is for my family,
Mm.
I'm going to be completing my marketing degree here in about a year and a half. My wife is finishing up her bachelor's, and through my educational benefits, she's also going to finish her bachelor's and work and actually get her master's. And my son, who's 2 years old and throwing tantrums, for the state of Texas, anyways, we have the Hazelwood Act, and he gets his college paid for too. And all while just serving, helping out my
Wow.
community, and having it's been very fulfilling, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Well, thank you, Sergeant Flores. If you're watching right now, over here to my right, your left on the screen, there's a QR code. I just scanned it, and it takes you to the nationalguard.com, and it's a really cool website. There's a tank on there, so if you like tanks, there's a tank, and so check that out. Please make sure you scan the QR code if you're watching on your phone. I'm sure there's some sort of app that allows you to do that. I'm not too familiar with how that works, but hey, check it out, nationalguard.com. Thank you, Sergeant Flores. Okay, Billy and Jackson. Um, I wanted to before we say what is the golden ticket? What is the silver bullet into leaving a legacy? I'd love to hear more about how you've worked with students and go ahead and keep throughout the night. We're gonna maybe I'll ask you some questions about, do you have any great stories about students that you've worked with that you just really stuck with you? But when we talk about the students and your student athletes, before we leave that legacy, what does it take to build those students up to be able to accept responsibility, or to be able to take over a role, freshman to a senior leaving, freshman taking over? What does it take? Let's start with you, Jackson, when it comes to working with students and helping them maybe even build their own legacy.
No, so I love this question, Bubba, and I think that Billy and I are going to have very different answers because I have a fraction of the tenure that he does. So a lot of my stories are, what are the legacies we've founded over the past, 3 years, right? But what I see with my students, being at a community college, we are extremely community focused. I mean, my program's biggest goal is to bring opportunities to the community that wouldn't exist otherwise. I mean, Southwest Missouri is not a hotspot for, online gaming. We're working on
Mm,
getting good broadband everywhere, right? So,
mhm,
having the college as a place where there's that, consistent availability and you can meet people like you that have that has been like the first step. And people even realizing that being part of that community is an option for them. And I think the other approach that we take is we try to be as low barrier as possible on anything that we print. We ensure that it's listed as hey, beginner friendly. Like, we want to bring you in, we want to build you up, and we have the resources, and we try to put together the staffing to make sure that you're going to be academically and competitively successful. And I mean, it's one of those things where, in my experience, it's just you have to have the resources ready, and you got to keep throwing them at
mhm,
people and throwing them at people, um, because sometimes they just don't know, right? Especially at the community college level, you get people showing up, their first generation, they have no clue what they're doing in this
mm,
collegiate esports space or their academic life. And so, before we can even talk about building a legacy, we have to keep in mind, like, okay, what it take for that student to get to their first day of class. And so that's really the approach that we take. And then from there, we try to have as many one-on-one meetings with our athletes as possible so that we understand, like, hey, where are you wanting to go? What are you wanting to do? My favorite example, last season, we have a student, Tyler Clement, who took the national title for NJCAA's Call of Duty Warzone.
mhm,
And this semester, he's been a work study, following me around, basically job shadowing the whole time, because now he wants to be a collegiate coach. And so, very much kind of like what Sergeant Flores said, we're kind of bringing up that next, showing them what we can, and trying to prepare them to go out and do that again for somebody else.
mhm. And that's great. I definitely appreciate that. How many students do you have in your program? Let's just say this year or this semester.
Yeah, so last fall is the benchmark I like to use because that's the last time I had like a final consistent number, and we were sitting at a 45,
Wow,
which
that's great.
our very first season we had 19, so that was a huge milestone for us.
More than doubled. And are you the only staff, or do you have other coaches, or what's the level of staff or volunteer opportunities there?
Yeah, we're in a really fun in between space right now. So last fall I had my 45, and I said, okay, let's see if we can get some help in here because it's catching on, right? And so
Hmm.
we were able to get me a temporary assistant who's contracted through May. And then at the end of this season, we're going to kind of reevaluate and see what we need to do with staffing to,
Mm.
ensure the longevity of the program. But I mean, outside of that, being a community college, we have this great flexibility with our programs where if I have someone that's interested in broadcasting, we can put together a course where they can get some broadcasting credit
Nice.
and they can help with our streams. If they want to do PC
Mm.
repair, they can get PC repair credit for helping us maintain our equipment and being on top of that. So we
Mhm.
really try to create opportunities for students to get some real life experience and hands-on stuff while we get the benefit of ensuring the program's survival through having enough hands on deck to make
Wow.
stuff happen.
That's great, Jackson. It seems like, and Billy, chime in here. It seems like, that's 45 students you got to take care of. That's a lot of work. So kudos to you, which is probably a standard. Sadly, I know that Billy and I talk about this a lot. The standard of a lot of students and one staff and or a potentially maybe volunteering in the staff role. But when I think about how what Jackson's doing, student first, we're talking about these opportunities for them to learn outside just the game. And I think about maybe how this relates to traditional sports or how it's different from traditional sports, right, Billy? Where you've got these students who are doing more in esports than they would probably traditional sports. And maybe football players are also getting degrees in media production or something. But it seems like in esports there's a lot more opportunity. When you look back at your teams, Billy, what have you been able to accomplish? When is there systems you put in place maybe you can help Jackson so he doesn't have to spread himself to 45 kids all the time? Is there some sort of system or cues or whatever you can help any of us out there when we're coaching a lot of students?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you have to establish a foundation of accountability. With every student that comes to the door, they have to know the expectation because at the end of the day, we are, like Sergeant Flores had said, we are raising the next generation and we're getting them into the place where they're the future leaders. The men and women that come through our programs will be one day taking over our programs. And so learning from the mistakes, we have to make sure that when we talk to these young adults that we're bringing through and getting them set up for the success is looking at, hey, you are going to be accountable for whatever actions that you take, whether that's going to be your successful ones or hey, you want to go a little bit off the beaten path and try something new. You're going to be accountable for it, and having that understanding out there is going to be the first and foremost thing to any legacy. Is it's paramount. It has to be there.
Mm.
When we talk about looking towards what type of systems, what type of things that can be put in place, the first and foremost is having standards that make sense. What are and Jackson, just direct to you. What are the goals of Crowder College and the esports program there? Is it to win national titles? Is it to get kids degrees and moving on to the next level? Is it job placement? And every decision that you make has to be in light of that, because if you start to mix and say, okay, we want to be a national contender, but then we're not putting budgets out there to help with that, then that doesn't
Mm.
make any sense. Whereas, hey, we want to get 100% of our students jobs directly after graduation. Okay, do you have job placement actual activities and job fairs and setting them up with one-on-ones with businesses to get them that placement? Are you actually setting that up? So every decision has to be in line with what your organizational goal is.
Wow. There's a question in the chat. I don't know if you're responding to it in Twitch, Jackson, but the question about being, you're full time there, because we've got someone in the chat, Bulk Candy, in Twitch, asking if how can he get his administration to be involved. So, what's your level of involvement there at Crowder College, Jackson?
Oh, sure. So, um, I am a full-time database developer and analyst, and that is my primary role. And my
Hmm.
esports role is sprinkled in there, which is far too common of a story, really. But it's one of
Yeah.
those things where I think a lot of, especially in the community college sphere, there's not a lot of community colleges that are making bank. And so you almost have to have that term where it's like, okay, like this is a proof of concept. Is this something that's going to be able to bring in students and become self sustaining? And, if
Mm.
so, then we can look at a full time person with the benefits and all of those things. And I mean, I'm more than happy to be that in between person.
Hmm.
Um, but eventually I think every school is going to need someone who like that is their career. That is what they want to
Mm-hmm.
do through and through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's
100%.
exactly where it goes back to having those standards. 100%. You have to look at, the program inception of, okay, we are designing this program, and a lot of the colleges, we'll be honest on it. It's for enrollment. That's what they're doing it for. At the end of the day, it's to bring students in the door, get them in seats, and get them degrees. There's no secret behind it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you don't have someone to lead the charge on it, and if you don't have, if we talk about programs where they're putting, hey, we want to go out and we want to be a national contender. Great. Are you hiring coaches that are specified within the games? Because you would never have your golf coach also coach your volleyball team. That's not going to be a thing. So why would you do it with League of Legends and Overwatch? It doesn't make any sense. So identifying that goal at the start is how you really start to build a legacy from day one before any student even steps foot into your esports arena.
Well, sure, Billy. That's the hope, right? Because why you're just coaching kids how to play video games. It's not as hard as volleyball and basketball, right? What's difficult about? And this is a real question. What's difficult about coaching video games? So what could be so difficult as maybe some administrators say in this space, Billy?
So I think the biggest thing is there's so many nuances within the games, right? And so when I was at Hawkeye, we had a Rainbow Six team. That Rainbow Six team won the national title. I have the ring right here for it.
Nice.
I never played Rainbow Six in my life, and I would never call myself a Rainbow Six coach. I refuse to call myself a Rainbow Six coach. I enabled the students to go out and make decisions that would allow them to be successful. I set them up with plans to communicate, but I'm not a Rainbow Six coach, and I felt like I did not earn that ring. I did not feel like I did. League of Legends is my forte. That is my background. I've sent players to LCS on rosters that have played in the LCS. I have had students that have went and started their own esports arenas. I have had students that have became coaches of their own right for top 5 programs in all of CLOL. That's my forte. When I look at doing that within Rocket League or Overwatch or Rainbow Six, games that I just don't have the extensive background in, it just doesn't make sense because that's not what I grew up doing. That's not. I just kind of got thrust into those, and we make it work. But it's a conversation piece that has to change because the nuances in every game. You have to be an expert and you have to dive into every single individual thing. You can't do that if you're doing it across 4 or 5 different titles.
Yeah, Flores, Sergeant Flores. I know this sounds right up your alley for working with people under your command, I should say. Yeah. So how do you feel about all this?
No, Billy hit the nail right on the head. Essentially, if you're doing multiple titles, they're very different games. For example, when I look at a MOBA, it looks like a hot mess. I don't know what's going on. It's a little too beyond my grasp. I don't play those games for one. But the analogy I like to use with a lot of administrators is, hey, the volleyball coach played volleyball either in high school or college, so it makes sense for them to teach or coach that, right? Now, when you look at esports, some of these titles are only a few years old. So how do you expect one coach or administrator or sponsor, if you will, to coach different titles? It just doesn't make sense. And back to what Billy was saying is having that goal. If you want to be a national contender, then you have to be able to put up the resources. You don't see one football coach out there on the field. They have an offensive line coach. They have for the receiver core and what have you, right? The running backs. They're all very specialized roles, and they require their own coaches and assistants. So whenever you look at esports, just remove the E and it's still sports. It requires the same level of care, same level of resource, and personnel is the most important thing.
It's funny how we usually say just add an E and you get esports. You're saying just remove an E. I don't know if I've used that term.
I played competitive sports, all-state tennis, cross-country, all-state, and band especially, which was huge for me because you have a lot of people working towards one common goal, right? So once people start realizing how similar esports is to regular sports, it kind of helps bridge that gap. And it's one of the reasons I use track and field as an analogy when I'm talking to someone for the first time. I've gone to universities where their sponsorship manager is like, hey, we bought all these computers and we're getting into esports. We know we need to be here, but we don't know why. So, being able to give the analogy of track and field is, esports is very diverse, right? You have MOBAs, you have like Rocket League, first person shooters, everything, right? Now, if you compare it to track and field, same thing, right? You have your relays, your shot put discus, your long jumps, your hurdles. They're all very different things, but all part of the same ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I've used a lot to help kind of bridge that gap and help them understand that, hey, this needs resources. You can't just have one person, I mean, obviously they're doing their best by all means. And that also opens up the window, right, for a lot of students to step up into leadership roles, gain that experience, and leave
Mm-hmm.
their own legacy as we're talking about.
Well, yeah, the track and field analogy is always the best, 100%, Sergeant
Mhm.
Flores. And when I look at the college I teach at, I mean, there's shot put coach over here with the throwing coach, same throwing coach and shot put coach, but the one who's teaching them how to run hurdles is a different coach. So it's a great analogy. If you're just checking in just now, we're here with the Army National Guard webinar series, the NJCAA. I've got Sergeant Flores, I've got Jackson Lewis Height, and Billy Howard. We are talking about leaving a legacy. And when we jump back into leaving a legacy, I kind of want to ask now, if we move into this last section, this last half of the webinar series, here is, how do we now look at these students if we were to move on to a new facility or a new program? I know, Billy, you've had this experience about how to set somebody up. So maybe I'll start with you, of your previous places you've been coaching. What success, uh, what have you done to make this successful even more, or continue on after you have left the program?
Yeah, so I think the easiest thing is to bring back former players for consultation. I think that is the simplest thing that takes additional no resources for any program. After students graduate out, bring them back in and say, "Hey, this is a student who went through my program the last 2 years. They graduated out. Now they're competing for X and so university at this level," and bring them back in for a coaching session and say, "Hey, this is an example. This is what you can be in 2 years," and kind of give that shining example of what it can be. Whereas it can get a little bit deeper with it as well. You can have players that will go out. Like I said, I have a couple students who went through me at the University of Northern Iowa, and now they're up in Madison, Wisconsin. They're going to be launching their own esports arena, and they're in talks with the city of Madison to basically run everything up there esports related. And it's going to turn into a huge opportunity for them. They're making a career out of it. But it all comes back to enabling the students and figuring out what is that passion that they want to do, and work with them one on one. Sometimes that just takes a simple conversation, and sometimes you gotta throw them out there and let them experience it a little bit more. But every college should have the mindset of what are we doing for them after they leave as well, not just while they're under my roof. Because once you get them outside the door, you got to check in with them. You got to say, "Hey, what are you up to? Let me know what you're doing." And so actually, I have a Discord server that most of my former players are in. I'll talk with them, catch up with them. And I've had one who's like, "Hey, like, I just want to thank you. You've really had a huge impact in my life and what I'm doing now. So much so, I'm going to apply for a job to be an analyst for TSM." Which is wild, because when I had him in my, like, he is like, "Oh yeah, I'm just doing this for fun," and now he's looking to make a full on career out of it.
That's a wonderful story. That's a great idea, is giving the Discord as still your community. When I think about community, Jackson, is there community outside just being at your um, facility where you game or where you compete? Is there community happening now that these students are together and building a legacy with each other?
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna give like kind of two different answers to that if you don't
Sure,
mind. But
please.
um, I we always survey all of our students before they exit the program. And for any new coaches out there, that data collection is like crucial if you're trying to justify anything to your administrators. So do a Google form, do anything, but make sure that you're collecting that information. But the number one thing that people say about the program as they're exiting is like, "Wow, I met people that I never would have met otherwise. I'm so glad I did this. I'm gonna have friends for life," and they do. I see them like in our alumni Discord, like always talking, catching up, trying to get together for games, doing meetups, like all of that stuff. And so, um, I mean, they kind of left a legacy with themselves in a way, in the community that they built, and were in a unique position with our institution. Crowder College has 6 different locations, and they're spread out throughout the area. And esports is an athletic program that we offer at all of them. It's an opportunity for all of our students. And so we have students from, like, 75, 100 miles apart that are, playing games together, meeting each other, talking about courses, all of that stuff that they never would have otherwise. So it's really strengthened the community on our student side, but also the community just in Neosho and in our area. I mean, we've really tried to become like that place for esports. So we have the community calling in with questions about like, I mean, the amount of emails I get where it's like, we're trying to put together a gaming PC for my son for Christmas or whatever. I mean, we've just become those people. And I love that for us because it means we're out there. We have a reputation of people trusting us. Our biggest fundraiser is we have a summer camp where we bring community youth in and educate them about esports and sportsmanship and all of that stuff. And that grows every time that we host it. And so, being able to leave that impact on the community, both inside of, the college and outside, that's been huge.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, gosh, summer camps, especially for esports, have just exploded over the past few years. Even more over COVID, right? And it looks like in the chat, what I'd love to hear, Jackson, maybe sticking with you, is that we've got a Balkan here in the chat. He's interviewing for the Griffins at Seton Hill University. So if anybody knows anybody at Seton Hill University, they are a NACE member. It looks like. Any advice? For the first thing I would ask is, how was your interview, and was it Jackson? Was it what we normally see in esports? Is, hey, you play games? Can you coach esports? And what is esports? I don't know if that was your story, but I hear a lot of that story from coaches. And what was your interview process like at Crowder College?
Well, this is another one that I'm going to give you kind of two answers to. I'll tell you about my interview process, and then I'm going to tell you about the interview process I put together for our assistant coach that we just hired, because you might like that one more. But my process was very much, we got an all employee email from our athletics director, pretty much just seeing like, hey, is there anyone willing to take this on? And I saw it as an opportunity to, it's like, oh, I care about games. I'm good enough at them. And I see like we could make an impact with this thing. So sure. And went in, did a short interview. But our athletics director, like, they're not a gamer. And I mean, they're a farmer and they do softball and all of those things. And so it was more of a, like, do you think you could do the job? And, oh, well, what's the job? And he says, I think this will be the job. And I said, if that's the job, I can do that. Sure. And I think that's kind of how it goes, is it's either you get a volunteer that shows up and is like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'll give it a whirl, or they seek somebody out who's like in IT that they know plays video games, like you said. And it's just kind of been history from there, rolling and dodging with the punches, trying to make stuff happen for my students. Now, the story I like better is interviewing our assistant manager. We sat down, we made a list of competencies. We said, okay, this is going to be a student focused role. What do we want this person to be able to do for our students? And we built an interview process around proving that they could do those things. We structured our questions in a way that guaranteed they would meet those objectives. And we were able to recruit like a internationally renowned Final Fantasy 14 player up from Kansas City to move down here to Neosho to,
Nice.
get into the industry. So we're extremely fortunate to have her. And that has been a fantastic hire.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So when we think about this interview process, maybe for the person in the chat in Pennsylvania, any last words there, Billy, of what this person can walk in to the university and give them the leg up on everything, because it's more than likely, I mean, it looks like an established program, but any advice for the person in the chat about taking an interview for a director position for esports at a university?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing is talk about growth. Hey, this is where you guys are. If we follow a certain plan, then in X amount of years, then we can have X amount of things. And they actually have a somewhat of a plan laid out. Do a little bit of research into the program. I think that research will go a long way. The number of emails that I've gotten of, hey, we want to come in and do give you esports consulting. And they're like, do you know who you're emailing? Like, and I don't want to say like I know it all, but like the number of emails that I get where they just haven't done their research on what are they reaching out
Mhm.
for. Having a little bit of research and background going into their program, like, hey, I see you guys made the College League of Legends championships the last 2 years, or whatever it might be. Which I think Seton Hill got the auto bid this year, so that might be a good bit of information for you to carry in. But yeah, looking at that, have that research in your back pocket, be somewhat well versed with it, but then also talk about the growth, talk about the future, and what exactly your expertise and strengths are. I know some people have a excellent background in broadcast and media production, whatnot, and they can really bring that to the table for their institution. Myself, it comes from the coaching, the analytics, and putting together championship level rosters on little to no budgets. That was my background, and that's what I've always been able to do. I couldn't tell you really the first thing about, hey, we're going to get a big 40,000 stream going. That's never been my forte, but I'll rely on
Mhm.
someone else to help me get that information.
Love it. Love it. Well, I hope that helps out for your interview. And when I think about what you guys have said, when I say Sergeant Flores, gosh, we're talking about how how to get a job. Do you ever have? I know this is really isn't the topic of the event, but hey, we're here to serve. We're here to learn and teach. And
Absolutely.
if you haven't seen some of the previous webinar series, there was a bunch last year. There's already been 2 this year. So those in the chat, please check out some of this previous streams. But Sergeant Flores, legacy interviews. What kind of advice you got for people out there?
Ooh. So, I mean, when I got, for example, this position in the Army National Guard, is a little bit different. We have quite a few other requirements that come into play. You have to be a good guardsman for one, right? There's a lot of documentation that goes behind that. But I was very fortunate enough to be hired essentially by 2 huge World of Warcraft players. So my interview was a little bit of unorthodox. It went well though, because they kind of poked my brain on, my general knowledge of the industry as a whole. So I actually happen to have played WoW a little bit enough to have fun with it. Um, and even it came down to conversations about anime and all these other things. What social media platforms do I play? Do I have a Discord? All these other little things. When it comes down to interviews, I would make sure to highlight your strengths and be open about your weaknesses and how you can improve on those. For me, especially when I hire on people, transparency is the biggest thing, because if I know that, hey, your strengths are here, but you just need a little bit of help in that, I can teach that. I can coach that. And you might be a better asset to my organization than someone who just knows one thing, right? So being able to do a couple of different things that enough about a few different things will help you overall. So especially in a leadership position, for example, like Jackson and Billy, you want to build people around you, right? So for me, I know enough After Effects, Photoshop, Premiere Pro, vMix, OBS to get by or even do well. But that's something that I can help teach others to where I can just, more or less manage them and give them a guiding hand. Because, there's a pretty good teacher out there called YouTube, which is pretty good on a lot of
That's right.
resources.
That's right.
So
Going
definitely, focus on improving yourself.
and going back to that YouTube thing, I mean, back when I
Mhm.
started, I'm the old man in the room. I got the cane and the walker ready to go. That resource didn't exist. There was no guide on how to coach esports. There was no guide on
Mhm.
how to become a better League of Legends player. If you wanted to learn, you had to go watch pro streams, and that
Mhm.
was it. And the thought of a college coach was so, how do I put this? It was a pipe dream at that point, because Robert Morris
Yeah.
University, they just given out the first ever college esports scholarship. Maybe you had like 5 or 10 varsity programs tops, and everyone else, it was student clubs. They were volunteering.
Mhm.
Esports coaches did not exist at the time. It was such a wild dream at that point. To now see it to where it's evolved into, hey, there are hundreds of really great people out there that are making things go, and they're waking up on a daily basis, and they're trudging through what I'll call the muck, that we're in right
Mhm.
now, and we're getting to a better spot, but it's going to take time. Those are the people you want to be asking for and learning from, because there's so much knowledge out there collectively among there that, I look at what Zoo is putting together for this League of Legends coaching clinic. It's been all over Twitter, and I think it's going to be a really huge hit. There's so much collective brain power in just that clinic alone between the 10
Yeah.
people that are in it,
Mhm.
more than you would ever learn off of YouTube back when I got started. So rely on those people for sure, and
Yeah.
make those connections. There's just
Mhm.
so much to be said for
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, and networking is huge. I mean,
Yes.
everybody in
Mhm.
the esports, it feels like in the esports industry is more than happy to, share their thoughts, share their experiences, and it's everybody helping everybody, which is really nice. It's a very welcoming community.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
Discord's out there helpful. Sorry, and Twitter. Twitter community is great resources for that. Go ahead, Jackson.
no, you're good. I was just going to build on what Sergeant Flores and Billy both said. I mean, in regards to the networking, the amount of information that's out there, and kind of the muck that we're in, I totally
Mhm.
agree. The amount of information available is astounding, but it feels like we have like this knowledge disparity, right? Like if you're in this world, you know it, and if you're not,
Mm.
you don't. And I think a lot of these brand new programs get maybe brought up by people that aren't part of that world, and they go to access that wealth of information. And there's a lot of misinformation out there too. It's, oh, can I start an esports program at my school? And it says, yeah, you just need a computer. Like, and then your school says, yeah, we have a computer, we can do an esports program, and it just kind of spirals from there.
That's
So
good.
I mean, I think there's so much hinging on getting the right information to the right people at the conception of
Mm.
those programs. I mean, going way back to what Billy said earlier, is like if you don't have your goals figured out at the very conception, how are you going to leave a legacy behind? I mean, if your legacy is going to be two or three, I guess office computers in a room trying to run Overwatch, then that's not going to cut it. So I think that the work to do now is figuring out how to connect the right information with the right people and kind of close that knowledge gap that we find ourselves in.
Wow. Well, that's great. Yeah, and thank you for the YouTube analogy there. And I think it was Sergeant Flores. Definitely, I definitely put in a dishwasher and changed my brakes because of YouTube. Thankfully, having those videos. Uh, Sergeant Flores, when we're wrapping up here, we have about 15 minutes remaining, and here for the next minute or so, I'd love to hear how the Army National Guard can really support leaving a legacy and what it means to become a guardsman and what kind of careers are available with the Army National Guard.
So, I mean, there's quite a lot, right? So as a guardsman, you obviously do your 2 weekends a month. I mean, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year, and we have a lot of college students. We have teachers that are part of the guard, mechanical engineers. Literally every industry is, we have guardsmen of every, shape, color, industry, whatever the case is. And you can do a lot. So for a lot of people, I'd recommend, with a guard, definitely look into it, see if it's for you, because it isn't for everyone. And that's the biggest truth is, it might be for you and it might not, but it's always good to check because a lot of it, the tuition assistance that you get and the skills. So I personally like to refer them as a lifelong buff, is that you get all this leadership training that you get paid to do, and obviously, with leaving a legacy, you have all these people teaching you these lifelong skills that have been passed down for centuries, even. And that's something that makes you a better leader, makes you react to things
Mm-hmm.
whenever you see a situation of, oh my God, everything's falling apart. You're now that person stepping up of, okay, we're going to fix it, we're going to do this. You jump into action a lot quicker, and you're able to help out a lot of people in your community, within your esports organization. And back to the legacy, like Jackson was saying, is closing that gap of knowledge disparity. Well, when you're leaving a legacy, you're leaving behind that knowledge, and you're sharing that with our, the people that are coming behind us, and that's super important. So within the guard, it's something that's ingrained to us, and if it works for you, I would absolutely take advantage.
Amazing. I love that. The thing I want to finish up here with you guys is this last moment. I responded to a tweet today that said, "What are some of the biggest challenges in esports?" I'm sorry, it said, "What was the biggest challenge in esports?" And I think we could probably spend another 4 hours on this. But I started a list, and I'd love to get some more to add to this tweet. I started with number one, consistency among leagues and rules. Okay, two, publisher power. Three, segmentation of organizations. Four, overhyped ROI, return on investment for sponsors. Scholastic salaries. I know Billy loves this one. Household name acceptance, like just knowing that it's there. I started then with my next part of it, the belief that programs can be run with everyday business computers, as to Jackson said. What are some other big challenges in esports right now, scholastic or not scholastic? And I'll throw this over to Billy to give me a couple things for my Twitter feed to look cool because you said it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest one, like you had said, is leagues working together. Consistency in rule sets, schedules. I mean, currently there are college leagues that are scheduling on top of each other, and inadvertently. It's not of any fault of their own. They're just putting their schedule out, and then, oh, hey, well, we put our schedule out the same day, and now we're both running Rocket League at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. What are we doing here, guys? So I think just getting more consistency across that. I also look at the forfeits and no shows, and I think this is actually the biggest issue because there's no accountability or there's a lack of understanding of what is college esports. And when we talk about getting students into the program, and like I said earlier, that foundation of accountability is your most important thing because you have no legacy if there's no accountability. If there's nothing for them to fall back on and say, hey, yeah, I made a mistake here. We're going to have to go ahead and rectify it there. How do you have that? So, looking at the forfeit and no show aspect, getting students to recognize and understand that, hey, we would never do this if this is a traditional sports match. We're not going to just not show up to our match. So why would we ever do that in an esports setting? But then also creating more resources for colleges to present to their upper administration to get that complete buy-in. As Jackson had pointed out earlier, getting every bit of data that you can have from a program level is great, but also looking at, hey, if we are looking to do something where we're really truly getting to a point of sustainability, and I don't say success, I always say sustainability, um, having resources that are out there that I could just give to someone that they can hand to their college president and say, boom, this is everything that we need to have a sustainable program, all listed here. Here's your data and proof why. That should be the goal that a lot of these organizations, and myself at Generation Esports included, I'm working on a document to do just that. Having those types of resources available to just hand to someone and say, here you go, this is the proven route, if you will, would be really, really beneficial. But it's a lack of, how do I say this, the misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation to fight through.
Thanks, Billy. Jackson, how in these 3 years, what have you seen that we face biggest challenges in either scholastic esports or esports overall? Professional or globally.
Oh,
Big question.
outside of the things Billy said, because I think you really hit the nail on the head with those. The thing that I would also bring up is this back and forth of esports versus regular sports, right? Because sometimes it's equal, sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's this, and it's we're getting to a point where there's some parity there, right? Um, but it's it seems like it's the same when it's convenient and it's different when it's not. And I think a lot of college programs will kind of feel what I mean when I say that. But then outside of that, just on like a national level, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, esports are the same, they're valid, and then the actions and the opinions don't really reflect that view. And so it's it's kind of this weird in between phase where you don't really have to prove yourself anymore because esports is more mainstream, but if you want to actually get anywhere, you do have to really push for that equal treatment with the other athletics. And that might be a problem unique to institutions that have esports under their traditional athletics, but I mean it's hard to disassociate when they both share five out of the same six letters.
I have always said that having esports on the same level, run it like you would run an athletic department, run it parallel to your athletics department, is really where you're going to find the most success. Student life, yes, it can work, because it does have a lot of tie-ins to, hey, let's actually, create the student atmosphere on campus and use it to bolster that. However, the problem comes into, okay, well, now if we're going to fund it using student government money and student life money, why is esports now get 80% of the pot and now your other clubs on campus maybe don't? So now it creates a little bit of dissonance on your campus. Likewise with athletics, where okay, esports is going to get such a small budget because that's what the misinformation has said of, well, you only need this, this, and this. Well, actually, you need probably
Yep.
about 5 times that. And so if you have it where it's parallel to athletics, but follows the same type of system where you're getting your funding from maybe your booster club, but it's parallel to it because if you have it under it, now you're creating a subdivision within the division to where it doesn't makes sense within the structure purpose of it. I've always thought that having it parallel to it, and there's some great institutions out there that I think do a really good job of it. I know Illinois State is one that comes to mind now, and look what they've done in just a couple short years. Their first, public institution, to my knowledge, that's going to be building a, multi-million-dollar esports arena on their campus and really fully jumping off the deep end with it. And I do believe, and I could be mistaken on this, but I do believe they run parallel to athletics, but they're not under it.
Got it. Thank you for that insight, guys. I'll finish with Sergeant Flores. You have been in this space much longer and seen it from a lot of different angles. What does esports need missing, and what are some challenges that we haven't covered yet in esports?
So it's really two things, but they really tie in together. For me, it's always the student experience. So my players we've coached colleges and high schools, and a lot of the reasons why we do that, it's like, hey, we were those students once. We wish we had these opportunities to have people that are at a semi-pro level be able to teach us and coach us. So, being able to be in the seat of that student and, giving them the best experience possible is really important because, again, legacy, they're next up to fill our shoes. So we need to make sure that they have a good experience, and that ties into the resources. How we're talking, being parallel to sports is that they need the same resources, right? Same personnel, especially where, you want to have a coach for every single team if possible, right? Or at least make that a goal, like Billy was saying, that you want to work towards. So where we have a coach for every team and, setting those expectations. Because ironically, and I was actually kind of laughing, Billy, when you were saying that about setting goals right at the beginning. In the Army National Guard, we call those initial counselings. We literally sit down and say, hey, this is what's expected of you, and then we're going to help you get there. It's the very first thing we do when we meet a new person or somebody joins our unit. That's the very first thing that happens, and that's very important. So, being able to make sure that we match those resources to help those students is the most important thing, because they are the ones that are going to be picking up the torch, if you will, or carrying on in our footsteps. They're the most important piece.
Love it. Thank you guys so much. This has been great. We covered a lot of things tonight, and I know we could all go longer and talk about more, but there's also more webinar series ahead throughout this year, I'm sure, that we'll be giving to the public, and we'll have, I'm sure, Sergeant Flores back, and hopefully you can once again carry me through Warzone or something fun like that. I know Billy, we're always on somehow on these calls together. We our paths cross a lot, and it's great. And Jackson, it was great to meet you today. It was so much fun learning, and I'm really excited for what you're going to do down there in Missouri, down there on the Missouri side. And I appreciate you guys for being here. This has been great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, you've heard it here. This has been the Army National Guard webinar series. We talked about leaving a legacy and a lot of other stuff, because that's just what we do. And we hope to see you back for the next one of these series events or other things on the NJCAAE. There's always competition going on or something going on. And I think there might even be some competition this evening for the match of the week, I believe. If I'm not speaking out of turn, does anyone know by chance in the chat what games are playing? If maybe they could put it in the chat for me, that'd be great. And thank you to Bulk Candy for having all these great questions. And I'm glad you're in the chat to learn some stuff from these amazing people. And it sounds like they're going to be playing some Valorant tonight. So thank you guys once again. This has been awesome. We'll see you next time on NJCAA, the Army National Guard webinar series. Bye.